Lots of people, including potentially you watching this video, are scared to come to Rio de Janeiro because Rio does have a bit of a negative reputation when it comes to safety, and this puts people off coming to Rio. Now, I personally spent 11 days in the city, and so I'm going to give you in this video 5 key safety tips that you need to know to keep yourself safe when you come to Rio. And by the way, some of these tips are not talked about by people online. Now, first and foremost, if you are scared to come to Rio and you do have the means to come here, you are making a colossal mistake, because as someone that has been to over 40 countries, I can categorically tell you that Rio is one of the greatest cities on earth. It is an unbelievable city to visit. The things to do, the activities, the vibe, the energy of the city, the landscape, the cityscape. It is truly magnificent. It is in my top 3 favorite cities on earth that I have personally been to. Now, of course, there are parts of Rio which can be pretty violent and pretty dangerous. And there are tourists who have come to Rio before and have been mugged or robbed. And by the way, if you have had a negative experience of safety in Rio and you've been to Rio, do feel free to comment below and let me know what happened to you, just so other viewers of this video can learn from your experience. But I can just only talk about my personal experience of being in the city for nearly 2 weeks. I personally did not feel in much danger at all. I was not mugged, I was not robbed. I did not feel like I was ever going to be mugged or robbed. I was even walking around 3 of Rio's neighborhoods late at night when it was pitch black outside. Granted, 3 of Rio's safer neighborhoods, but still I was not followed around by any creepy dudes, unlike certain cities in Europe, Brussels. But without further ado, let's get into my 5 safety tips for the city. Now, my first safety tip is to make sure that you do have the Uber application downloaded on your phone before you arrive into Rio. Now, when you arrive into Rio, you're either going to be arriving into the main bus terminal, the Novo Rio bus terminal, or you're going to be flying into the airport. Now, when you arrive at the airport or the bus terminal, as soon as you walk out to the main exit point, you are going to be swarmed with hounds of people shouting out, "Taxi, taxi, taxi, taxi." Now, if you do not speak Portuguese fluently, I would recommend that you avoid those taxi drivers and those taxi services. Firstly, because you don't even know if they are real taxi drivers. And secondly, if you don't speak Portuguese, you are more likely to be ripped off, overcharged, or maybe even something worse than that happen to you. On the other hand, if you use Uber instead of taxis, you can't be overcharged on Uber because the price that comes up on your Uber application is the price that you pay. And it is much less likely that something bad like a robbery could happen to you with an Uber driver, as Uber drivers' ratings are all listed on the app. Also, something very important to mention about Rio is that when you land at the airport or when you arrive at the bus terminal, the taxi stand where the taxis are waiting to pick people up is different from the Uber stand where Uber drivers go and pick people up. Uber drivers are not allowed to pick people up from the designated taxi stands at both the airport and the bus terminal. So what you need to do is you need to follow the signage that says Uber. So when you see that Uber sign, you follow it and you go in the direction of where you're told to go. So for example, at the bus terminal, the Novo bus terminal, you need to get to Garage G1. And this is a car parking lot, and this is where the Ubers come to pick you up. If you get lost, which you may do, I did get lost, you can ask someone to guide you to this G1 car parking lot. The bus terminal is quite big and it's a bit confusing. You do need to go up and down some stairs. If you just follow the sign that says Edificio Garagem, it will take you to roughly where the G1 garage is. Additionally, I would recommend taking Uber at night time if you are maybe going out to a restaurant or a bar quite far away from your apartment or hotel. Now, you can also use the metro system in Rio if you're nearby a metro station. The metro is really affordable. At the time of recording, it is 7 reais 90 cents. That's about $1.50, so it's very affordable for a one-way journey. However, the metro does close before midnight, so if you are at a bar or a restaurant late into the night, make sure that you call an Uber to get yourself back home. Now, moving on, my second safety tip for Rio kind of sounds like an obvious one, but some people do make this mistake. Do not stay in a favela. Now, of course, you probably don't want to stay in a favela, I would assume, but people do end up booking Airbnbs and accommodation in favelas without realizing they've booked an Airbnb in a favela. So let me get some maps on the screen to demonstrate exactly what I mean. So on the screen now, you are seeing the Copacabana neighborhood. In fact, this is actually where I stayed for the first 10 days of my trip. And in fact, I would actually recommend staying here. You've got lots of bars, lots of restaurants. I felt really safe here during the daytime, even at nighttime as well. I was walking around here at nighttime. I had no issues at all. Not saying that I recommend you to do the same. I am perhaps a little bit braver than most, but prime location, great place to stay. And also not far away from Copacabana, two other great neighborhoods to stay would be Ipanema and Leblon. Leblon is on the left of this clip. Ipanema is on the right of this clip. I would say that both Leblon and Ipanema are a little bit more bougie than Copacabana. You have some really posh, fancy streets here, and also you do have some English style buildings, which I found quite interesting. But anyway, getting back to my point is this: Zona Sul, or the south zone of Rio, Copacabana, Ipanema, Leblon, this is the most desirable place to stay in the city. So then you go to Airbnb or booking.com and you're looking for places to stay in Zona Sul, and then you find somewhere to stay in this region that I've circled here, and you think to yourself, yes, I found a good deal in a brilliant part of town. I'm near Copacabana, I'm near Ipanema, this is prime location, this is perfect. Well, congratulations, you have booked to stay in a favela. Those roads that I have circled are on a hill, and that hill is a favela, so you probably don't want to be staying there. Also, again, if you find a good deal on Airbnb in this part of town that I've circled here, you may be thinking, yes, I've won the lottery, I'm not too far away from Leblon, this is a great location. Again, no, this place is a favela as well. In fact, you can see on the screen here, this is the favela that I just circled, literally on the screen there. So that goes to show that if you're not paying attention, it is very easy to book accommodation in a not so very nice part of town. So I do recommend using Google Earth so that you can actually view the street location of where you're staying before you make any bookings. As a general rule of thumb, if you are staying anywhere to the right of this black line that I put on the screen here, you're probably going to be okay. Most places to the right of that black line are not too bad from my experience, barring the odd favela here and there. Again, do your Google Earth research first, but most places in this region aren't too bad from what I saw. Now, to the left of that black line, especially the further north you go, oh, it is horrible. It gets rough, extremely rough. I would not recommend staying anywhere to the left of that black line. Do not do it. But going back to the right hand side of that black line, you do have some other nice neighborhoods that you could stay in as well. So you've got Botafogo. There are some nice bars and restaurants in Botafogo. I personally did prefer Copacabana, to be honest, but Botafogo is another option for you. You've also got Flamengo. I actually did not go to Flamengo, so I cannot comment. Also, you have Centro, the downtown historic center of Rio, which, by the way, is much nicer than the downtown historic center of Sao Paulo, I must emphasize. Now, if you stay somewhere relatively close to Carioca metro station, I found this part of town to be quite nice, to be honest, especially during the daytime. Now, I have heard that at nighttime it does get a little bit more rough in Centro and a bit more deserted, so just be aware of that. But during the daytime, I found this part of the city to be quite nice and pleasantly surprising, if I may say so. Now then, my third safety tip is to keep an eye on your belongings when you are in public, especially your phone, and I would recommend not to wear any bling or any jewelry. So there are videos online where tourists have had their phones snatched out of their hands by people on bikes, and also jewelry and necklaces snatched from them too. So I would not recommend wearing any bling or anything fancy unless you're going to a high-end elite nightclub or bar. You don't need to dress up in Rio. Everyone's dressed down, everyone's wearing flip-flops and t-shirts and football tops. You make yourself a target if you're wearing fancy jewelry and fancy designer clothes. With regards to phones, just make sure that you hold your phone tight when you are out in public. But to be really honest with you, when you walk around neighborhoods like Copacabana, Leblon, Ipanema, Botafogo, even Centro, you're going to see lots of people out on their phones, walking down the street, carelessly texting, not really worrying if their phone's going to be snatched. So to be honest with you, I would not stress too much about using your phone in public, because so many people are using their phone, but just hold it tight, especially if you are on a sidewalk and you are by the road, just hold it extra tight. I would also, really important, make sure that you hold your phone super tight when you go up Christ the Redeemer, because there are monkeys at Christ the Redeemer, and they are known to snatch things from people, so be aware of that. And by the way, if you are in Rio for a very short period of time, like 3 or 4 days, I would actually recommend booking this tour that I put on the screen right now, because this tour takes you to all of the highlights of Rio in one full day. It takes you to Sugarloaf Mountain, Christ the Redeemer, Maracanã Stadium, Celarón Steps. So you get to see all of the big attractions in the city in one day. This is actually the tour that I did. I would recommend it. I've put a link to this tour down below in the description of this video, and also the comment section too. The link is there, and you will also notice other links to other tours that you can do in Rio, such as a helicopter tour which takes you all over the city in the sky. It looks unbelievable. I did not do this myself, but I wish I did. You also have other links to tours of the Maracanã Stadium and also pub crawls, so check out those other links too if you are coming to Rio. Now then, let's talk about my fourth Rio safety tip. Not too many people talk about this one, but if you look like a clear foreigner and you have pale white skin, when you go to places like Copacabana, don't be surprised if people come up to you and try to sell you substances. It reminds me a bit of Lisbon, where lots of people do the same as well. However, the big difference between Lisbon and Portugal versus Rio and Brazil is that in Portugal, those kind of things are decriminalized. They are not decriminalized in Brazil. Those kind of things are illegal, and you could be in serious trouble. Furthermore, you also do not know what you are buying. You could be buying baking soda, or alternatively, you could be buying something really serious. There is something in Rio called Boa Noite Cinderella, which translates in English into Good Night Cinderella, and it is this substance, and it is quite famous in Rio because there have been people who have been spiked with this thing, and it turns you basically into an obedient zombie, and people have been absolutely robbed of all of their belongings and all of their money on this substance. So you need to be very careful not to get involved with these sellers. And also, if you are going to any kind of nighttime nightclub venues, be super careful with your drinks, because that is a common place for spiking to happen, especially in this district here called Lapa. This is a very famous area of Rio for bars and nightclubs. Be extra vigilant with your drinks here. And finally, let's talk about my fifth safety tip for Rio, and this one again is not talked about a lot by people, but if you are going to Copacabana Beach or Ipanema Beach, Leblon Beach, the Zona Sul beaches, you need to be very careful in the water if you are going to be swimming there. The currents are unbelievably powerful, and in the past people have been ripped away and rescue teams have had to come to save people, and also the water in Rio is unbelievably cold. Now, to be fair, I did go to Rio in June, which is Brazilian winter, but I have heard that even in the summer months, December, January, February, the water is still freezing then. So Rio water is not great swimming water. If you want beaches where you're going to be able to swim and enjoy the sea, you probably want to go to the northeast of Brazil instead of Rio. Also, just a bonus safety tip that I want to mention, which is not really a safety tip, but something you do need to think about when you come to Rio and Brazil. If you are going to a bar or restaurant, just make sure that you pay close attention to your bill or to your check, because sometimes, not all of the time and not most of the time, but sometimes in Brazil, they can mix up your orders, and also they can add on extra stuff onto the bill that you did not order. For example, I went to one bar where I was ordering medium-sized beers, and then on my bill, I noticed that they added on large-sized beers, which were obviously more expensive. Don't be afraid to question these waiters and waitresses, because if they do notice that you don't speak Portuguese and that you are a foreigner, they sometimes do like to squeeze a bit extra out of you, and they do like to play some games, so don't be afraid. They will go and change it if you question them. Also as well, one thing about Rio compared with the rest of Brazil, generally in Brazil it's customary to pay 10% service charge at a bar or a restaurant. It's just a polite standard thing to do. But in Rio, what I notice is that some bars and restaurants will put on 15%, sometimes even 20% service charge on your meal or on your drinks. Again, you can ask for this to be changed to 10% or even 0% if you want to, but again, it's kind of polite to pay at least 10%. So it's just another way that people from Rio like to get a bit of extra cash from tourists. With all that said, hopefully you can tell by these clips in this video that Rio is a beautiful city, and as I said at the start of this video, you are making a big mistake if you refuse to come here. It really is worth it. Stick to these safety tips and you're going to have a brilliant time in the city.